This is the Forward Motion Business Show with Professor Ken and Professor Paul A. Marino. Hit new heights. Start with Forward Motion.
Hey, welcome to the Forward Motion Business Show. I'm Professor Ken.
And I'm Professor Paul Marino.
And I think we have a great show today. We're going to talk about the opportunities businesses have for hiring employees and the difficulties that these businesses have while we're out there. Here we are coming out of the COVID. It's October 2022. There's a lot of jobs still out there, but we don't have enough people, enough employees to be put into those jobs. So Paul, what do you think about that, and how does a business handle some of that?
Well, I think you could describe it as the Great Resignation.
Right.
You know, people are kind of resigning from the workforce, and I think it has to do with the mindset of the younger generation today. There's certainly a Me Too, it's all about me generation. So when they look at a job, not only do they want significant compensation, but they want a lot of self-esteem. They want to do
immediate satisfaction.
And it's an immediate satisfaction generation. Yeah. So they're not going to go into a teller position where they're going to do rote work for 8 hours. They want something that's intellectually stimulating. They want something that's rewarding, and I'm not sure that businesses are prepared to empower their employees to do that.
Yeah, and I think there's also a very stark difference between what the employees want and what the employers are willing to give up.
Big disconnect.
Here we are in South Florida. It's always been a difficult job market, meaning my impression of it, coming out of New York, is that this job market's very transient, because we do have a lot of people that come in and out of Florida. From an educational point of view, it's difficult, and from what I understand, major corporations don't like to be down here because of the threat of hurricanes. Now, we just had an incredible one that hit the West Coast, so our thoughts and prayers are with those families there. And I think that's a reason why companies don't want to be here, but I think the talent pool is not here either in some cases.
Well, I think that's changing. I think now you're seeing a mass exodus out of the Northeast. They're coming to places like Texas. They're coming to places like Florida because of the somewhat lower housing, the somewhat lower tax structures. But I don't know if the businesses have kept up. And I'm not pointing fingers at business owners, but the day of someone working in a sweatshop are over.
Yeah. And I think that's the key. So if we look at some of these things that we researched, the Great Resignation, of course, is a big thing. People rather work at home. And let's be honest, the digital environment now, you can still make, if you want to make $50,000 from a computer sitting at a desk, that's very possible right now with all the different opportunities that we have. So, and then there's the quality of life, right? You're resigning for the quality of life. So those days of retiring at a company and getting a gold watch, those are so long by us. The days of the 9-to-5 structure is so long by us. I think we're just now coming to grasp with, hey, this remote work thing is a real thing. I've been doing it from the road, working my business from the road for most of my career, so I understand that. But now that we're adjusted, everyone wants to work from home, and in fact, they can't. Some of the bigger employees can't get their employees back to work.
Well, my opinion on that is, during the height of the pandemic, a lot of people got used to working at home. Now that the pandemic is over, the employers want the employees to come back into the workforce, to come back into the corporation headquarters and work at a headquarters. And people have gotten spoiled by working at home. Now, are there people who could be as efficient at home as they are inside the workplace? Yes, there are. But that is not the majority of the workforce. And number two is, when you're not in a work environment, there are certain things you miss. You miss the corporate culture. You miss the corporate interaction. You miss the discussion on the direction of the company. You're kind of, when you're working remotely, you're kind of like an island out there.
You don't, and so that's a big problem, I think, too. How do you rise up in the corporate world if you're not seen? The whole big thing, we grew up being seen, right? First in the office, last to leave. I mean, that's what we are culturally grew up on. But we have to be seen. Who's going to see you doing, pushing the paper around or filling the water at the water cooler, all those extra things that you would do to move up and to get recognized? You can't be seen. Now, people see the work remotely, but if I was a 20-something, how do you get noticed? How does somebody say, "Oh, that guy over there, that 20-something's doing a good job"? How do you rate that? How do you see that with your eyes?
Well, I don't think it's so much being seen, because I hope we're beyond that. But I think the point is, what is your contribution? What is your contribution towards reaching our goals? What is your contribution on growing this business? And if you're not around the table with people and you're not part of that reportage back and forth, it's easy for you to be overlooked.
Right, and that's true. You have to be part of that discussion, regardless of where you are, whether you're in front of a computer or you're in the office. So if you look at some of these points about why the gap between what an employer wants and what an employee needs, so the Great Resignation was really top of the list, but the number one reason is low wages. We're not, the employers are not willing to give a higher wage. Now, things have changed. The environment has changed. I mean, I started off, I think I was getting paid, maybe $2.75 an hour when I started, or $2.35 an hour, something like that. So the minimum wage now has moved up, I guess, to $15, which is still not in line with, with inflation and cost of living and all that. So we have a disconnect there too, what the employers are willing to pay and what the employees want. Now, I do think employees want too much, but that's the way I feel right now.
Well, I think employers, and I advise my consulting clients, is you have to view compensation as more than wages. Yeah. Okay, so someone comes in and they're making a minimum wage. And this is typical of Wall Street. Wall Street has been doing this for ages. You come into Wall Street and they give you a salary to keep the wolves away from the door. Okay, this is what's going to keep the lights on in your house, keep your family fed, and keep you concentrating on your work. But everyone there knows that their compensation comes through their bonus package at the end of the year. Right. So I think employers have to take some pages out of that model and say to someone, yes, you're coming in at $15 an hour, you're coming in at $25 an hour, but we're going to measure your production. We're going to put a metric on you that's going to measure your production. And that production is going to be based upon your bonus at the end of the year, or your quarterly bonus, or your semi-annual bonus. And that's where your big, chunk of money is going to come. And when you do something like that, either through some type of employee compensation plan or some employee stock option plan, you find out that those employees become owners. They become de facto owners. So the business begins to grow exponentially. I'll give you a good example. I was with a client last week and they were talking to me to take a look at their 401k program. And I said, sure, I'll be happy to take a look at it. And what they do is they give a certain percentage of salary to the 401k for each employee. And I said, well, why would you want to do that? They said, well, we want to put together a pension plan. We want them to have money when they retire. I said, well, that's a very noble concept, but why are you basing it on salary? Why don't you base the 401k on the profit of the firm? Right. Instead of giving them a percentage of their salary, why don't you say, this is what the firm made this year, and you're going to get a percentage of profit. Now, if the firm doesn't make a profit, God forbid, and they have a loss, then obviously they don't get a contribution.
Right, but does that now negatively affect the morale if the company, well, you can argue that if the company does poorly, maybe the team didn't perform, you can argue that, or unnatural things could happen, right? Recessions and things of that nature. The company is not profitable. Then if I'm the employee, I'm thinking, hey, wait a second. You used to give me a bonus every year based on my salary. Now you're giving me a bonus based on performance or based upon how the company is profitable or not. I came to work every day this week, and I came to work, 52 weeks a year. The company didn't make profitability. I'm sorry about that, but I still earned my bonus. Isn't that the thinking?
Well, if you're going to be in the business world, you have to accept the business risk.
Yeah, but I don't think employees. If you're an employee, I don't think you understand that business risk.
I'll tell you a great story. Years ago, there was an article. I don't remember if it was in Fortune or in Forbes, and this editor got wind of this family, husband and wife, who owned a very successful business. And the rumor was that they were going to give away 50% of the stock of their business. So they sent a reporter out and they said, this can't be true. We want you to go out, we want you to investigate the story. So sure enough, the reporter goes to the factory, goes to the business, and he says, look, I wanted to interview you guys. We heard a rumor that you're going to give away 50% of your business. Is that true? So the owner, the husband and wife, says, yes, it's absolutely true. We're going to do it. And they said, well, why? Why would you do that? Why would you give away all your hard-earned work, and why would you give away your business? They said, well, we're very comfortable now. We're close to retirement, and we wouldn't be as comfortable as we are if it wasn't for our employees who made this a big company and made us financially secure. So we want to give something back. So he said, well, how did that work out? How did it work out? Did you actually do it? He said, yeah, we did it. They said, well, how did it work out? He says, it's really curious. The moment we did that, the profit of the company doubled. And the reason why it doubled is we had no more absenteeism. We had nobody slacking off. Because the people who were doing the job, if they saw someone slacking off, they would say, hey, you're losing my money.
Right.
You're
engaged.
You're engaged.
Right.
And they told the story that the woman who buys the supplies for the company, the pads, the pencils, and the erasers, they said she'll kill you for a paperclip.
Right.
She's gonna negotiate right down to the penny because everybody has skin in the game.
Right. And I think that there's some value there, and I guess if you go back to listen, I sort of say because we are where we are in terms of age and experience, and I tell my classes this, in the digital world, I said I have 1 foot on the analog world and 1 foot on the digital world, right? Because let's face it, we've been there, done that, but then we've got all these new experiences. So been there, done that. Growing up, we know that you have to put in your 20, 25 years with the company. You really didn't job hop. The average job was you with the company. You changed the job 4 times in your professional life, maybe 5 times. I read a stat now, and the average millennial doesn't stay at a company more than 3 or 4 years. They're moving on. So that means if they're working 30 years, they're going to have 10, 11, or 12 different companies they work for. Now, I'm not saying that's bad. I'm not saying that's good. It's just a difference. And I think about this 9-to-5 mentality we used to have. And I always think about, you bring up this bonus situation. Do you remember the National Lampoon, the Vacation movie with Chevy Chase with the Christmas time? And he planned on his bonus. He was waiting, the whole movie, he's waiting for his Christmas bonus. And he planned buying putting this big pool in the backyard with the Christmas bonus, and the bonus didn't come until later. It was a big whole thing. It was all part of the movie. And you mentioned, in Wall Street, you live for that bonus, and I was in commission, so I always lived for that quarterly commission too. So you eat what you kill. Right. I don't know. I think and I have children from Gen Z to millennials, so I get it. I just think they don't put in their time, and I think they expect their time to be very immediate. So I'll share a story with you. My first job, I was 14 when I started working. I got a job at a local toy store. It was a 3-story toy store, toys and hardware, things like that in New York. And I was excited to be there. I was getting paid whatever that minimum wage was. I showed up my first day, you know, bouncing around, let's get things done. I was 14 going on 15, something like the legal, just below the legal working age. I might have fibbed and said I was 16 or something like that. So I get to work, and the manager of the store, his name was Rocco. I was in Howard Beach, which is an Italian neighborhood in New York. He sends me down to the basement and said, kid, go down there, and you're going to meet Harry, and he's going to be your manager. I said, okay, good. So I went downstairs. Now, visualize a 3-story building that has not yet been completed. So the construction's being done. You got the dust still on the floor and on the ceilings. So I say, hey, Harry, I'm Ken. I'm here to start working. He turns to me, and you know, they used to say, okay, kid. He grabs, it was a room in the corner of the room. He turns around and hands me the room and says, get to work. So I had to sweep the entire floor up. And I remember going back home, and I was full of this drywall dust. I had drywall dust in my nose and in my mouth. And I said, man, work sucks. And you know, so I think that's the key right now. A lot of younger generation don't really appreciate that you have to put in your time, and they don't think that work should be work. They think work should be a quality of life. I don't know if that's wrong. I would love that opportunity to be able to pick and choose when I work, how I work, and what I get paid. You know, I would love to climb the corporate ladder, just show up and be number 3 in the corporate ladder. I would love to have that happen to me.
Well, I think they have to be, you know, there's merit in what you're saying, but I think the employee has to see that there is a path. For instance, some of the biggest Hollywood agents at some of the biggest agencies out there, and these guys make multi-million-dollar checks at the end of the year, they all started in the mailroom, every one of them.
Of course.
That's where they started, and they didn't care if you were a vice president, they didn't care who you are. When you came in as a young person into the firm, you worked in the mailroom and you learned the business from the bottom up. But those people in the mailroom who interacted with those top agents who are handling all these fabulous stars and making these fabulous compensation checks realized that, yeah, I started in the mailroom, but I'm not ending up in the mailroom.
And that was interesting too. We talk about that that T-Bone's picking video, the leadership video that we like. And he says 2 things that I think is really interesting. First, he says work ethic is very valuable, and you need to have a good work ethic. Yeah, we can talk about that in terms of what we're seeing in terms of employees. But he said something even better than that about having a plan, right?
Right.
He says, and he tells the story about his dad telling him this in college. A fool with a plan could be more successful than a genius without a plan.
Right.
And I think that's the key. You have to have a plan. You have to have some type of a 3 to 5 year plan. When I always started with a company, I said, okay, I'm starting here, but in 5 years, I like to be there. And I would work my way towards that. I think what we're seeing now, and we talked about the Great Resignation, we talk about this thing called, what is that, silently quitting or something like that, quiet quitting, whatever they call it, where you don't work all your jobs, you just stop at exactly 5 o'clock, 5:01, you're out. I think when our newer employee, our younger generation gets into a job, if they're changing jobs every 3 years, are they really...
No.
Are they really engaged? Are they, as soon as they sit in the seat, they're saying, what's going to be my next job in 3 years from now? Right. So they're not really they're not putting in the time.
Well, I think they're cheating themselves. Now, again, going back to the Pickens plan, the T. Boone plan, it doesn't even matter if your plan is 3 years. If you go into the stockroom the first day and your job is to sweep it like you had, you're saying to yourself, well, I'll do this for a couple of weeks, but I want to see what comes next. Right. So I think the planning is essential. But I think from the other side, from the employer side, he has to show that employee, like let's say you're coming in and you're a sales trainee. You don't have a book of business, you don't have anything, you're struggling to get your feet under you. But that employer should put you 1 day a week or 2 days a month with the top salespeople,
Right.
and see how he's living his life. So you say to yourself, well, he's driving an S-Class. If he can do it, I can do it.
Right. And I think that's the key. You got to coach up. You got to have those mentors. You got to have something to look forward to. You know, we talked about Wall Street. My brother spent a lot of time on Wall Street. He always used to tell me, you know, hang out with the rich people and act like the rich people, and that'll get you closer to being rich.
Well, it's going to rub off.
Right, it's going to rub off. Right, and if you hang out with the wrong crowd, you're going to end up in the wrong environment. So let's segue into. So we talk about the employer-employee, which is something that's difficult, and what we're going to try to help our local businesses find the right employee through some of the platforms we're using. I think one of the things that is an option now for a 20-something or a millennial, even for us boomers, is owning your own business. Now, there are some, because we're going through this, we have high inflation now, and everyone's talking about a recession, and there's, you know, pluses and minuses, gas prices and food prices, everything's up. Those that are the baby boomers that might have retired are having a hard time meeting those needs that they have today. So I'm trying to help older, you know, experienced pros like you and I, maybe to open up their own shop. And I'm not talking about opening up, you know, an ice cream shop. There's a lot of things online that you can do right now, like e-commerce stores, online courses, what I'm doing, digital marketing, all that can be done online, and you can actually make $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 doing that. My agency does that, and that's what we do. Even a consultant like yourself, you can do that. You have 35 years of experience. Can't you use that experience to help another company and get $75 an hour and maybe work 15 hours a week to make some extra income?
Well, I think now, you know, I've owned some pretty successful businesses. I think there's more opportunity now than there ever was then, because there's much more money in the system, there's much more affluency. I think you could pretty much do whatever you want, but you know, I always tell my students, if you're going to go out on your own and you're going to start a business, don't think you're going to work 4 hours and go home and watch the kids and play ball. You know, if you're going to start a business, I didn't take a vacation when I started one of my businesses for 3 years. So, you know, they don't call it work for nothing.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
You got to stick in. You got to stick in it. Who's that Nightingale? Is it Earl Nightingale?
Earl Nightingale, yeah. Okay.
So, you know, if you listen to us now, if you haven't checked out Earl Nightingale, you have to just YouTube him, and he's got some amazing things. In fact, if you listen to it, and this was stuff from the 50s, or late 40s, 50s, he's one of the first motivational speakers and all that. What he said back then applies a lot today in 2022. And what I love about what he says is, you know, we live in, and I'm talking about living in the U.S., we live in one of the richest environments, the most opportunity, and so forth. So you can ask anyone who comes from a different country to be here and you know, for that opportunity, right? So what is your excuse for not being successful? And the way he breaks that down, he just says, if you put 10 young men together at the age of 25, one will be rich, you know, or be well above their means. 3 would be, you know, financially okay, and the other 6 would be in hard times. And if you think about that, they all start at the same line, but they take different paths, and they work at a company for 45 years, but they're never achieving what they want to achieve because they don't have a goal, they don't have a plan, or they don't see themselves doing something else successfully. That's why I think there's 2 ideas here. One is working for a company, being an employee and a good employee and a loyal employee, which is helpful, but don't think about I'm out in 2 years, because you don't really engage in 2 to 3 years. And the other one is, how do you open up your own business and define your success? Is it money? Is it a happy family? Is it vacationing every year? What are those options?
Well, I think I try and break it down a little further for my students. You can be an entrepreneur within a company.
Yeah, they call that an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah, an entrepreneur. So you could, I say to my students, you might want to consider taking a little bit less of a salary. You don't need that money right now. And instead of going to a very established Fortune 500 company, go to a startup. And when you speak to them in your initial interview, say, look, I'm willing to give up some salary. I'm willing to work hard. But is it possible for me to get stock options? Is it possible for me to get some type of payout? Now, if you go back historically and you look at the people who started with Bill Gates when he started Microsoft, all of those people who took options versus pay are all multimillionaires.
Even employee number 200.
Right, exactly. So there's a way to be an entrepreneur inside of a company. But the other thing I think young people have to understand, and I say this a lot inside my charity, I tutor disadvantaged children, and it's my honor to do that. But I sit them down and I say, look at this room, look at the talent that's sitting in this room. We could teach you to be a doctor, we could teach you to be an engineer, we could teach you whatever you want to be, but the one thing I can't teach you is desire. If you don't have the desire to do it, then none of this matters. And you have to understand that when you go into the workforce.
Yes.
If you want to go with the flow, you're going to be part of the flow. But if you want to stand out and you're willing to do what it takes to stand out, then your path will be much different.
Yeah, and having the opportunity to manage teams over the years, and I used to have higher ups, VPs come by and say, hey, listen, Joe, he's a little bit ambitious. You gotta keep him in his lane and stuff like that, right? And I always used to have a rebuttal. I said, listen, it's always easier to turn the fire down than to turn the fire up.
Exactly.
If he's not ambitious, or that employee is not ambitious, why is he here?
Right.
Why are they here? Why do they walk into the door? We can get a lot of non-ambitious, unambitious employees. We can get a lot of them,
right,
and pay them what they want, have them come in, tap on a computer, but we want innovative, we want creativity, we want someone who wants to drive, just like your illustration of the story, giving away the profits. If you got a vested interest, if you got a skin in the game, then you're more inclined to be more successful.
I think businesses today, the environment is much more competitive. I think it's much more fast-paced because technology is changing so quickly. So if you're a business owner, I would tell you, you should give the shirt off your back to the people who are aggressive and buy into your vision and make it happen. I just was talking to a friend of mine, a very successful guy, and I asked him about one of his employees because I knew his employee personally. We've met and we've talked. I said, well, how is so-and-so doing? He says, fantastic. I said, really? He said, this year, he's going to become $1 million producer.
That's amazing. Yeah, and he's gonna get rewarded, reap those benefits.
Right, just bought his wife a new Tesla.
Nice. Well, I'm not a big Tesla fan, but it's a nice gift.
That's what floats your boat. You know what I'm saying? Happy wife, happy life.
Buy an electric car, but you don't have a way to power the electricity up once we get rid of gas. And but that's another show.
Right, that's another show.
Yes, exactly right. So how do we solve this? You and I are business owners. We want to hire. We need one person to hire. We look for the right person, and they come in and they say they want $10,000 more than we're willing to give them. Do we say, okay, we'll move on to the next person, or do we?
Well, let's
say we'll give you 5 now and 5 if you make it.
Let's define the problem first, okay? From the employer side, they want the best person that money can buy. That's what they want. They're looking for the best person. They don't care, male, female, ethnic, religion. They don't care. They want the best person who's going to buy into their vision and get their corporation where they want to go. Right. Okay? The problem that I see from the classroom is that our students really lack any world experience. Right. So they may have a degree in accounting or a degree in marketing or a degree in finance, but they really don't know what they want to do.
Oh, who does at 20-something?
Right. And they don't know how to ask what they want to do.
Right.
So I think the challenge to the employer, and I fight for this in the school, is to create a program. You remember when we were coming up, every big company had a training program.
Right.
Every big,
and you had to put 6 months in.
Yeah. Some of them were a year.
Right.
Some of the big banks were a year.
Okay.
But those training programs are gone.
Yeah.
So it's hard for the employer to convey the vision to the employee, where the employee buys into it and says, yeah, I'm going to work hard because I'm going to be like him.
Yeah, but I think it's too, I don't know, maybe it's too expensive, or maybe at the time, because it's such an accelerated work commitment, right? If we talk about being with a company 3 to 5 years, I can't give you a year to train and then I gotta pay you too. No, I need you to come in, know what you do, or at least have a half a sense of what you're doing, get to work, not make too many expensive mistakes or errors in judgment, and in a year from now you'll be more experienced. I think it takes a minimum of a year to learn a position, to learn the company, to understand the culture. And what I'm saying is, if you come into a company, you expect to be paid whatever the wage is, more than you should get paid, but it's a competitive environment now. But as soon as you sit down, you're saying, okay, in 3 years I'm going to do this, then how do you get engaged? Another thing I thought of, and this goes back forever, companies that have employees, they give that raise, right? They give you that 3% or the 5%, which, by the way, now doesn't even cover inflation, right? But they use that as a carrot to keep that employee there. So they get that 3 to 5%. They're happy, right? They're a satisfied employee. But the truth is, if they would decide to job hop, they might be able to get 10, 20, maybe 30% of what they're making now,
right,
because they're switching jobs. So I think that's what we're seeing now too. I need an employee. You're getting paid $10 at your current place. You come to me. I like Paul a lot. Let me give him $14. I give you $14. What are you gonna do? Where are you going? You're coming over to my end, right?
Right.
So we're sort of buying, as an employee now, we're sort of buying that time. So
yeah, but everybody loses because everybody's job hopping.
Yeah, everybody. Well, I don't know if everybody loses. I mean, let's just face it. The employer gets, they're renting an employee. Right? I'm a big baseball guy. No one goes. The very few baseball players now stick around for 10 years on a baseball team. So I'm renting an employee. I'm hopefully getting his maximum output, her maximum output, paying him a fair wage, and then in 3 to 5 years you're moving on and you go into the next. So it's a whole cycle. And I think that's the reality we're in now. I can't expect an employee to be with me more than 5 years.
But how about if we did this instead? Let's say you came in to a business, and I look at you as a young person right out of school, and you have all the basic needs I want. You're smart, you're quick with math, you've got all the basic materials. You've got all the dough to make the bread, okay? You've got all of that, okay? And I say to you, come with me. I'm not going to pay as much as the next guy. I'm going to pay you less. But I'll tell you what, I'll review you every 6 months. I'll put in a compensation program where you can get a bonus every 3 months or every 6 months. I'll put you with my top people in the field that you want to be in, whether it's sales, whether it's finance, whether it's computer program, and you'll learn from the absolute best. You'll have the best mentorship you've ever had. My IT guy is the #1 guy. He's out of Virginia Tech. He's got an engineering degree. I'm going to put you with him. You're going to learn from the best. Okay? You rather be with me, or you rather get $5 more an hour?
For the $5 more, I think that's the mentality. You and
I don't think so.
I don't know. I think it's all about satisfy me now. Now maybe there's a small portion of them that would think out what 20-something is thinking 3, 5, 10 years out. Everything's so fast right now, and I don't know if there's a commitment there. So
I can't tell you how many people come to me and say, I'm in a dead-end job. I wish that I could get with a mentor who could really take me to the next level.
But can they afford to do that? If they're at a dead-end job, rents are up, gas is up. Can't even buy a used car for what you could 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. Food is up. Everything is up. There's nothing that's less even here in Florida, which used to be a pretty less expensive place to live. Everything's up. So if I want to be out of my parents' house, mm-hmm. can I afford to take $15 an hour? Can I afford to take a step back and get a mentor, and maybe 10 years from now I'll be much better?
Well, I don't mean a 10-year period. I mean someone who's going to be on a fast track, because as that person learns from that mentor, I mean, let's take a young salesperson. Let's say you come out of what's that, Nova's sales program, because they have a sales program. So you come out of a sales program, you may know the book part of selling, but you've never really sold anything in your life. And it's much different when you're in front of a client, right, making a sale versus someone else. So you come into this business, whatever the business is, maybe they sell copiers, maybe they sell computers, and so you're getting a wage and you're getting by, but you see that the top 5% of the sales force is $1 million producers. They're way above you. They're way above you. And I say, look, if you come in and you stick with me, I'm going to put you with one of these top people. And not only are you going to learn how they close sales, they're going to help you close your sales.
Right.
So within 12 months, you're going to be way ahead of everybody in your peer group.
Right. And I think, so that might be the solution. I think you just hit on something. So employers are having a hard time finding employees. That maybe they can't pay the wage, or they want to pay a lower wage. I think that might be it, right? Let's take the fast food and the fast food service, McDonald's University, Chick-fil-A, right? You can't touch a franchise. You got to be there with a year, and they grasp that concept. You can't
right.
fly a plane unless you have X amount of hours.
Right.
You can't be an accountant unless you have X amount of hours. You can't even be a professor at a school unless you have a degree and you have X amount of professional hours either. So let's do that. I think employees should do that, regardless of where you are. So if you're a pizzeria, a kid comes in, instead of giving him $15 an hour, it's minimum wage, so you got to meet, you got to follow the law, but normally they might get $18 an hour. You say, listen, I'm going to give you $15 an hour, but I'm going to teach you how to make pizza. Whether you decide to do that 5 years from now or 10 years from now, whatever it may be, you may be a pizza maker yourself, and you might be able to make $300,000 a year. I'm going to teach you a skill that no one else, very few people know, but come work for me, and then we're going to do that. Now, that might be the answer. That might be the answer for some of these employees who can't find people. Give them a path to success. Remember, we used to do these interviews. I mean, it's been a long time since we've done interviews for a job. What would be the question they ask? Where do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years? And you would have to have an answer. Well, I want your job, right? I mean, you wouldn't say that exactly, but you say something close to that. That would be somebody you want. Today, maybe the employees have to do that. They have to sit down and say, listen, here's where you are today. You stick with me a year, you're going to be here.
Well, let me tell you what a friend of mine does. He's a very, very successful guy, and he is one of the best salesmen I have ever met. And he has a very successful sales force. When he takes a new person in, not only does he take that person under his wing and goes on the calls with him, but he gives them 2 or 3 house accounts as their accounts. And he says, these machines are on lease, these machines have been sold, you're going to manage this account. You're going to upgrade them, you're going to renew the leases. So not only do you get a salary, but you're going to get an immediate bonus
right.
flow.
Right.
And when you go see these accounts, that have 10 machines, 20 machines, 30 machines, and you're going to have to renegotiate their lease, I'm going to go with you.
And that makes sense. And that's the program that we're talking about. Well, I don't know if we solved this today.
Well, I think we kind of stuck our finger in the pie. I mean,
Yeah,
I
right.
think
Exactly right.
I think we've kind of given the young people some insight, and I would say to young people, if you go just for the money and you pass up the opportunity and you pass up the education and you pass up everything else, you just may be selling yourself short.
And you will be a job-to-jobber. You will go from job one to job two, and you never. And then as we close here, going back to Earl Nightingale, he does say something else. He says, so the average person is going to work at a job for 35 years, 40 years, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for 52 weeks a year, 51, 58,
Right.
depending on if you get vacation. He goes, if you do the math, whatever that hour number is for 30 years, he says, are you telling me any decent individual with a common mind can't become an expert by the time those 40 years are up, right? Become expert at something, whether it be within a company or outside of a company. You can become expert at something.
Sure.
And that's what's going to drive your success there. So,
No question about it.
well, I appreciate the conversation. Thanks for joining us today. Join us next time. We'll actually be working with some local companies and talk about the HR opportunity and how we can drive more business with finding good employees. So thanks for joining us. I'm Professor Ken.
And I'm Professor Paul Marino.
And we'll see you out there real soon.
Get a 5-minute business book review, pivotal moments with failed businesses, and hear an interview with a business disruptor who will share their $10,000 mistake. This is the Forward Motion Business Show with Professor Ken and Professor Paul A. Marino. Hit new heights. Start with Forward Motion.